Okay, in this lesson we're going to update our grid and start preparing ourselves for mobile and responsive layouts. So far we've only done one grid, which is a desktop scale. The pixel width is 1440 by 1024. This is for clearly for laptops and desktops, and we just call it grid. Now we're going to have to prepare ourselves for being responsive to mobile, and for that we're going to need a mobile grid. So just first of all, this one desktop. So let's rename this one to desktop grid / desktop. Right, so now that's clear. And the name here, we called it layout grids, which is not going to be good enough for us if we're going to have more than one grid. So that means we would have to rename this, and we're going to name this one grid / desktop. And now we're going to have to create ourselves a mobile grid, and we'll just use Figma's out of the box. There's a lot of fine detail here, but let's just go for this 13 and 14 artboard. And let's name this one grid mobile. Okay, now we're going to have to create a grid set for this too. So let's create a grid as we did before. Columns here will be 4, which is a more reasonable grid. That's correct. And the margin we are going to leave as 0, so we can have elements that touch both sides. And the gutter we will use our spacing tokens as before, M16. Okay, so now we have a 4-column mobile grid, which will help us to lay items out 2 by 2 up to 4. This is one way of doing it. There are other options, but let's just stick to the 4-column grid for simplicity. We can add a baseline grid. Now you might want to finesse this for certain conditions, but we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to follow the same rhythm. If I believe the gutter was 8, there we go, and the height was 16. So we've kept the same vertical rhythm because we're going to use the same body text. Now in more advanced scenarios you would want to change that, but for now that's going to be good enough for us. Okay, so now we have our layout grid set up for our mobile artboards. Now we need to add this to the list of grids. So this one's going to be grid mobile layout. Oops, there's my spelling thing. Create stop. So now we have our grid mobile. Okay, now we're ready to start laying out our mobile. So we can now, for example, go to our form, which we have a login form. This is obviously also desktop scale. So really, we're going to need a login page for mobile. So we're going to have to create the same. Now, we could make an artboard. We could make a component for our favored artboard size, but we're not going to do that now, but that is an option. This is going to be called login. I might prefix it with M. So this is the mobile login, and if we want to apply the grids, we can apply them here, and that will help us lay out our assets. For example, we can drag that in here. Let's zoom in a little bit. Now we don't really necessarily but if we wanted to align this to the grid, it would go touch the edges of each of these columns, and in the center, well, we haven't finished our form actually, but we just put it generally in the center because we're going to elaborate this form later, because this form is too simple. Let me just hide the grid for a second. Obviously this login form is too simple. We have a lot of things we need to update on this, but we're going to go piece by piece so we can start actually prototyping, and then it will become obvious where we need to make changes, and we will go back and make those changes as we go along, so we can actually gain some traction on building our prototypes, understanding how everything fits together. So let's get on and get to enhancing our login form.